Well, hello everyone, and welcome to my shop. Well, all right. Well, welcome. Today's episode, we're going to get back on the scheduled preventative maintenance on this Chevrolet, this '49 Chevrolet pickup, and this will be part two. Part one, I did a basic overview and I set some benchmarks for the upcoming tune-up, and today we're going to do the tune-up. This is a 3,000 mile tune-up since the engine was rebuilt. And I'll cover some tune-up specs here on the 235 engine that is in it, which is a 54 engine, and I'll also cover some tune-up specs on the old 216, the 49 216 that was in it that I pulled out, that's sitting over here on the engine stand. So stay tuned and we'll take care of this, we'll get busy. There's a lot of similarities between the 230, this 54 235 and the 49 216. One of them is the plugs. They use the same plugs and the same gap. So that's a commonality between them. So what I'm going to do now is pull the plugs and read them. I want to see, try to read them and see what kind of condition the internals are, how it's firing and everything. And it could tell us some additional information. See, I've got a mark still here. That's where number one, that's where it'll fire number one, and it's way past it. So we've actually got a lot of spinning to do. I may use the engine to do the spinning for me. So let's see, let me see if I can get set up and we'll do that. All right, we're trying my headband cam. I don't know how good this is going to pick it up. All right, we want this tip of the rotor to line up with this mark here, and it's either going to be on the exhaust stroke or the intake. So we are going to find out, and we can do that. All right, now I'm going to show you. Okay, now I've got the light showing. I tell you, they just couldn't have put this at a harder place to see. All right, see right there. Now you see there's a dot to the left of a long line, and you can probably make out the pointer. That dot is the standard timing mark on this engine, which is 2 degrees after top dead center, okay? That long line is top dead center. That is the top dead center of number one piston. And to the right, which you cannot see any numerical digits, is a 1 that I put on there that I figure is probably close to 8 degrees advanced. So anyway, what I'm wanting to show you is we are at top dead center. Now if I want to remove, focus up, there we go. If I want to remove that distributor, I know I can line this pointer back up with that mark, and I'll be right back real close to the original timing that I was set at. So that the whole idea of what I just did is just to get a good reference mark in case I want to pull that distributor. All right, we're going to attempt to read the plugs here, and I've been looking at them. There's all 6 of them laid out, and number 6 is the best one that's got the marking I want to look at. And what you want to look for is on the tip right here. Now where my knife is pointing, you'll see there's a darker coloration at the tip and a lighter here, and there's a cutoff point right here. There's a line right here. Now what that's telling me, according to what I've studied, is that the timing is almost dead on, and which is kind of amazing, because I think I can actually get some more advance out of it. But you want that mark to be halfway on this electrode here, this ground electrode, and it is almost there. It's real close, and I'm moving over here where I can see it and it probably won't do you very much good to look here, but you can see it better there. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it's almost halfway. And I'm looking at the electrode, the center electrode. There's no wear, there's no deposits of any kind, no oil, no gas. You know, they're not wet or sooty. I mean, this almost shows me that it's burning perfectly. But I'm still going to introduce a little bit more advance on this. I think I can get, because of the high speed. Now that's the number 6 plug. That's number 5. He looks almost the same. Number 4. I'm gonna move him over here where I can look real quick. Now he doesn't have hardly any timing mark, that discoloration that I'm talking about. Now that would indicate retarded. Okay. There's number 3, and it's smaller. The mark is shorter on the plug, about to here, which would indicate it was retarded some. You want it more advanced. Okay. Number 2. Number 2 is looking real close to what number 6 looked like, which is almost spot on. Right here, you can see there's the mark there. All right. And number 1. Number 1. All right, it's short. Okay. Hard to make out on this, but number 1 is short, right about right there. Where we want it, about right here. So it's about right there. All right. All right. So what the plugs are telling me is that this engine is really burning good. It's running. And it's almost timed just right. Alright, we're going to pull the rotor button off. Normally he just comes right off easily. He's not wanting to come off very easy, is he? There we go. May have to grease him. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to put the points on this cam, the top of the cam, and it's just off. So let me see if I can rotate the engine a little bit. We're almost on it. Remember, it's always easier to rotate an engine with the plugs out. Alright. Now what I've got is 18 thousandths feeler gauge here. I'm going to put him through there and see what we get. Boy, them points are really closed. Wow. Well, what you want to do is unloosen this top screw right here. Doesn't have to be too much.
And then this other screw here is the cam that actually turns the points to open or close them. Okay. Now what I discovered when I was let's turn that light off. It's probably messing with us. It's not needed. What I discovered in setting these before is that when I set them to 18 and tighten them down, they'll spread another 2 thousandths. So what I want to do is set them to 16. So that's good right there. All right. But I'm going to set them to 16, tighten them, and then see if they tighten up to 18. All right. Now here's 16. What I want to do is close them up a little bit. I need to tighten these up. There we go. There we go. And there's 18 right there. You want slight drag, but you don't want to see the arm move. Okay. Make sure that's good and tight. Now what I'm going to do, I'll show this better on the 216. I think I can get a better camera angle. All right, but that's right there. So this was actually, these points were actually closer than we're closed up some. That rubbing block down there that rubs on the cam lobes here, there's 6 for each cylinder. Apparently it wore pretty good. I mean, it got to the point where it would have quit on me. All right, that's 18. That's exactly where I want it. Right there. All right, there we go. All right, this rotor button looks real good too. Now that's actually the points and rotor button and the plugs are all 3,000 miles brand new. I put them in brand new about 3,000 miles ago, and this is showing hardly any wear. So I'm going to reuse the rotor button and the points and the plugs, and I'm finding out that if I do this by hand, I can do it a lot better than trying to use some other stuff. Okay, we're down in there. All right, what I'm going to do now is this, I'm going to pull this cap off and fill it with grease. All right. Make sure nothing comes out. You can see he's a little low in there, so we'll put some grease in there. And what I just use standard wheel bearing grease. I know there's probably a special kind for it, but that's what I'm going to use. Going to fill him up. If you can always remember to give him a couple twists every now and then, you'll get some lubrication in there to that distributor shaft. This actually goes all the way in there and lubricates the distributor shaft. Alright, I'll just make a little cone there at the middle. Alright, there we go. That's about how much I put in it. tell you the truth, I'm somewhat surprised at how much I ended up putting in here, because I filled this thing up. Well, a lot of it's coming out, squeezing out. All right, get him started on there. I was trying to avoid putting my arm there. All right, there we go. All right, I got some resistance where I'm turning it, so that's about as far as I'm gonna go right there. All right. I'm gonna put them back in the cylinders they came out of also. You know, one thing nice about an inline six with all this room is it's really easy to do some of these tune-ups. Now these are all, I didn't know if I was going to stay with them, but they're burning so good. But these are actually Autolite 803s. All right, they're equivalent to what would go in here. And there's not a, I mean, the way they burnt, I'm going to stay with them. I don't see any problem running that. We're buttoned up there good. Now I'm not going to do anything with the fuel bowl on the fuel pump. It's clear up top. There's a little bit of garbage I can see in the bottom, but not enough to clear it out now. It's not giving me any trouble, and I've got an additional filter, so I'm not going to mess with that. So we're pretty much done on this side, and so we're going to move over and the other side. Well, all right. I neglected to add while I was adjusting the points that any change in the point gap will also make a change in your engine timing. Your point gap, your point setting, and your timing setting are both directly related to one another. So keep that in mind. Anytime you do any adjustment to your points, you definitely want to check your timing, and you'll probably have to readjust your timing also. Another thing I neglected to show was checking the gap on the plugs. The plugs I checked the gap at 35 thousandths, and that's where they're at. They didn't need any adjustment, so that's good. I just neglected to show it. And one additional thing, I am not going to pull this valve cover on this engine at this time and check the valves. The valves are not rattling, they're not loud, they're still as quiet as they were originally after I broke the engine in, and I had an hour run time just before I put it in, installed it in this truck. I did one last run to drain out all the coolant radiator flush and block flush, cleaned it out, and I checked and adjusted the valves at that time. Only a few needed adjustment, so I don't feel that the valves need adjustment at this time. But the manual does say to check the valves on a tune-up. And what I'm going to do is I'll show that procedure over on the 216. I realize many of you that may be watching this that has a stove bolt truck and engine probably have the single carburetor or more stock engine. And some of the stuff I'm doing on this engine isn't pertaining to your engine. So after I'm done setting this up, I'm going to show some related procedures on the 216 over on my run stand. So stay tuned for that, and we're going to get back at it. All right, we're about getting ready to do fire it up. We'll double check our coolant level. You can see it's topped off. And you know, I on the part one of this, I went over the benefits of having an overflow tube, and I can't stress the benefits of it, and just saving you money on antifreeze. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the engine up. It's got the oil change, got the points reset, and we're going to get this thing ready, and we're going to set the timing and adjust the carburetors if they need it. To do is warm up to where it'll idle at 600 to 650 RPM. It'll take it a couple minutes. We'll be right back. Alright, we're set about 640, 650 RPM now. We're warmed up. Now the adjustment for the distributor, I'm going to get it. I won't be able to hold it down here while I'm doing it. But right down there is a screw, a straight slot screw right there. My screwdriver is pointing to. Try to get down there right that way. Right here, right? Now I'm going to loosen that, and that's when I'm going to turn the distributor, okay? So right now I just want to kind of see what, since I did adjust the points, I want to see if it adjusted the time in any. So let's see. If I remember right, I was at 5.5. So let's move it up to 5.5. Get it down here where you can see what I'm doing. Alright. Now this should center that long top dead center mark right on the pointer. Let's see. And it's not. It's actually, boy, it's a lot more advanced. It adds up. Well, so that's altered the timing pretty good. All right. Now my next step is I want to set my timing to the maximum mechanical advance, which would be 3,000 RPM. So we're going to run this thing up to 3,000 RPM now. Don't get a little noise. Now I'm gonna see where I'm at on idle. I'm gonna take it down to around 8. Let's see where it's at. Because I did advance it some. About 13.5. That's kind of surprising. All right, from 5.5 to 13.5 at idle. Wow, that's something. Now I know I had to set the carburetors down, so I'm going to have to adjust them now. Alright, I'm going to remove the air cleaners. Now generally when you set your carburetors, the only reason why I'm taking the air cleaners off is I want to check with my snail gauge to make sure both carburetors are balanced. But one thing good about a digital tach, that RPM did not really raise at all, did it? Alright. Now what this snail gauge is going to do, this is a snail gauge, it's going to tell me, there's this red BB, I want it centered, and I want both carburetors at that setting at idle. Oh, we got to remove that. My thumbs aren't worth a hoot anymore. Alright, here's the first one. Now I don't know if you can see the bubble right there about midway. Right, that's where I want it. Now this back carburetor, I want it the exact same. See, what this is telling me is one carburetor is pulling more than the other. That's almost right dead on it. He's almost right dead on it. So I'm satisfied both throttle plates are equal. Now I'm going to adjust the fuel air mixture. See if we can get it any smoother. And that's this one right here. We'll start with this one. Find the slot. like that. I really like that digital tach. See, there's still some vibration, but that's because I can't idle any lower than this because of the cam. Like I explained earlier, this cam is not stock. It's got more lift, more duration, and more overlap. It's a 3/4 race cam. It's designed to give more RPM, more power at higher RPM instead of wearing out. So low RPM, it's not that smooth. This is about as smooth as I'm gonna get it at low RPM. There you go. All right. So I'm pretty satisfied. You know, I've really did now. When I go out and do my test drives, I've got more stuff I need to do. But when I go out and do my test drive and I find out that the low speed is missing, like it was before when I had it too advanced, or it doesn't idle any good, then I know I'll back that timing off, and I don't have to go to the 3,000 RPM to get the setting. I can just do it all off idle. I know right now, and I'm gonna double check it and write it down, but right now I'm at, I think 13.5, or was it, yeah, 13.5, which is a whole lot more than I thought it should be at idle. But anyway, let's see. Exactly where it's at, 13.4. So I'm gonna write that down and show, and that's my new benchmark. And like I say, if it ends up being the performance isn't as good, or I get valve clank, I know I can back it down from 13, and I know 5.5 it ran pretty good. So anyway, and it's getting a little warm. Yeah, you know, these are opposite from diesels. You know, diesel, the more you idle it, the cooler it'll run. In this case, the more you idle one of these stove bolts, the warmer they'll get. But I've been idling probably for 20-25 minutes now, and look, it's just barely into the zero of the 180. And it's probably, I'd say we're in the 80s right now outside. Anyway, go ahead and shut him off. All right, a good deal. Well, that's the basic tune-up on a 235 in a 49 Chevy, and we'll just we're going to now go over and we'll do some procedures on the 216. All right, I want to show you what I'm calling the snail gauge. Actually, it's actually referred to as a unisync, and it's designed for a round carburetor throat, you know, round carburetors. And this plastic cover was one of the protectors that came with the carburetor. So I just cut a hole and modified it, and used handy old duct tape to adapt this unisync tool to this cap, so I could put it on those square-throated carburetors, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. And what it does, see, this spins, and it goes up, and when you spin it, you're either bringing it up or down, and you're either allowing more air through into the carburetor venturi, or you're restricting it. And what you want to do, you use this to set this red BB, or yeah, let's call it BB. This red plastic BB to where it sits right smack dab middle in this gauge. You know, it can go all the way up or down. You want to set it to that, and then once you get it set via this this setting here, you take it over to the other carburetor. Now, if it does not land in the exact or pretty close to the same area, you know you've got more air or less air going through that carburetor. And what you have to do, you adjust that up or down, and also it means you have to adjust the other one up or down. And the goal is to get both throttle plates exactly synchronized to where they open and close at exact the same time. Now, these carburetors, they're 32 millimeter Carter Webers or Motorcraft 740s. One carburetor is too small for this engine. It's even being a 2-barrel, it's too small. So you need two, but you need them synchronized. If you have one throttle plate opening more than the other, well, what'll happen is you'll have 3 cylinders either running richer or leaner than the other, or it could be more. Now, I'm not convinced. There's no separation plate in that intake manifold to keep the rear carburetor's gas from getting to the front cylinder when it's open, but I'm going by the general proximity of the carburetors to the cylinders, that the front carburetor will feed cylinders 1, 2, 3, 4 more so than 5, 6, and then the rear will feed 5, 6, 3, 4 more than it will 1, 2. So you want to get them equal. You want to get them synchronized and equal, and that's exactly what this tool did. And you can see I actually had some adjustments I had to do. When I adjusted the points, it increased the timing of the engine, which increased the idle RPM. So I had to back the idle RPM down on the carburetors in order to get around 650, and that's where I want to set my idle setting at 650. I could actually get it even smoother at 700, but I want 650 at this point. I may up it up. And so you can see, even adjusting the points, adjusting the timing, also entails having to adjust the carburetors. You get all of them synced together, working together to get your most efficient, optimum setting. So anyway, that's what this tool does. I very rarely use it, and you only need it when you run multiple carburetors. Well, all right, this is a 1949 Chevrolet 216 cubic inch overhead valve engine that came originally in this truck and was in that truck up until last fall when I replaced it with the 235 that's in it now. But anyway, actually this engine will still run. Its main culprit was a tremendous amount of blow-by, which pretty much is the indicator that the rings are shot. And all the shims were removed from the main bearings. So the previous owner, who I knew, Mr. Glee, he had already removed them to try to get that oil pressure back up. So pretty much it's had a good life. I decided to pull it and salvage it now so it can be rebuilt at a later date. So with that said, let's go over some of the things on this 216. And again, this is pretty much stock. Almost everything on it, other than a couple mods that I'll show you, is how it came new. All right, that's the single barrel Rochester carburetor, and that's the actual air cleaner that came on it. You can see it's not much more than a wire mesh, so it's not the best cleaner in the world, and it would get all that garbage in there and it would help wear them rings out. So I later added this over here, which is an oil bath air filter, and it's a lot better than what that was, but it's still not as good as the modern paper element types. So that is that's your single barrel Rochester carburetor. On the previous video, I pretty much covered this side of the engine as far as the bypass oil filter. which I believe I'm going to put on the 235 and the oil distributor valve down there, and how oil gets to the top end. So let's move to the other side and we'll show you how the points are set on this. All right, these are it's almost identical to the 235. The exact same point, the point gap is the same, which is what you want is 18. Now if you're putting brand spanking new points in, you want to set them to 20 to 22, and that will allow for the wearing of the wear block that opens and closes the points, and it will eventually wear and set in. So the optimum setting you want is 18. All right, the rotor button is different. Too many moving parts here. The rotor button is different. The actual distributor, a lot of the distributor is the same, how you set it, but a big difference in this distributor is the drive gear is a different material than what's in the 235, and they will not work. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And let's see if I can, I don't know if I can spin this engine or not, but we'll try to spin it by hand and try to get that cam lined up. Spin it without upsetting too much. All right, we should be right smack dab on the tip. Let's see, are we? No, we're not on the tip yet. There. All right, we're on the tip. Now I'll try to let me see if I can show a close-up of it. All right, this is easier to see than on the 235 in the engine. We'll put him back. I tell you, this light is not worth a hoop sometimes. It will not do what I want. One of these days I'm going to invest in a magnetic. All right, hopefully you can see that there's a gap right here. There's a point gap right there, okay? And you can see that the arm is on the high side of this 6-lobed cam, which when it rotates around, it opens and closes the points, okay? And there goes those screwdrivers. All right. So let me free up a hand here and we'll get the feeler gauge out. All right. Ideally, we should get 18 thousandths. And let's see, and it's closed up some, and there's a little there. I'm hitting, you know, when you slide your feeler gauge in there, if you hit any kind of obstruction, it should be smooth all the way across the point surface like on that 235. If you hit an obstruction, that means that you're going to probably have to take a burnishing tool in there because the point has burnt a spot in the actual point coating. All right, so this is actually, these points have actually closed up some, and they're less than 18. All right, the arm is moving. Now let's see if we can get this out of the way somewhat. Get a screwdriver. All right, this bottom screw here is the cam. This screw here is what tightens and loosens. Over the years, they kind of get a little wore. All right, so you want to loosen to where there's some drag to where wherever you put the points, they'll stay. Okay, we'll open it up. What I want to do is open it up enough to get that feeler gauge in there. There we go, without moving the arm. A little bit more. Okay. See, it's hitting that little obstruction, so I need to get my burnishing tool. All right, but I think that's pretty good right there. So what I'm going to do, let's do a little tighten. Let's see if it stayed. All right, it stayed. All right. Now I'm gonna break out my burnishing tool. I've had this tool forever. All right, and that's the burnishing tool there. It's like a fine file All right, so we put him in there. Now, sometimes with points, you don't need to run a burnishing tool. Sometimes you'll just take a piece of white paper and with the points closed, open them up enough to get the paper slid in there and slide your paper back and forth, pull it out and see if you get any carbon tracks. If you get a lot, do it again and again. Ideally, if you can clean the point surface with just a piece of paper, that's the way you want to go. If not, you'll need to break out a burnishing tool like this. All right. And that'll take that that ridge down, that little point down that was burnt into the points. Let's see what we can do now. And we're sliding right in there, just like we're supposed to. You want to feel, it's all really a matter of feel. You got to get the right angle, and you want to put it in there, and you want to feel resistance on both sides if you can, but you don't want to see the arm move. All right, you don't want to see the arm move at all. If it moves, you're not at the right. You're either at the wrong angle or at the wrong setting. All right, right there. Sometimes you can only go at it one way, and that's it. So that's where you want to be. All right, so that's set, and I kind of hope you seen that it's easy. You know, back I worked in a tune-up shop when I first got out of the military, and I did brakes and tune-up. That was my main thing, and I worked around a bunch of old timers, old school boys. I'm talking about old school boys that worked on Ramblers and Nashes and Packards. You know, I mean, these old boys knew all the tricks of the trade, and I was just amazed at what they would teach me. And they would pull the distributors out. They'd set, because they knew they were going to set their timing. They were going to have to set the timing afterwards anyway. And especially on an engine like a Slant 6, it's a whole lot easier to set your top dead center on your #1 plug, get your timing mark set, and then pull your distributor and do all your work outside. I would have showed you that on this, but I didn't have to replace the points. And but pulling the distributor is actually the easiest way to. Let's look at them points. See, I don't know if this camera can pick it up. They're burnt a little bit, but they're still very serviceable. I think this is only the second set of points I put on this engine in 25,000 miles. So these points are probably 10 to 12,000 miles on them. And they, other than that little spot that I could have knocked off with my burnishing tool, I mean, they're fine. You know, the capacitor's good. So that's pretty much setting your time, your points on a 230 on a 216 engine. One way you can tell, an easy way to tell a 216 from a 235 is, you see this side pan is the whole side of the engine. You see that? That's only on the 216s. I believe the Splasher 235s were only partial, all, you know, where the head was at this part and the pan was down. But I'm not for sure. Maybe someone that has a Splasher 235 could remark on that. All right, moving on to the valve cover. All right, these two acorn nuts, they're loose. Now this, that is not the stock oil filler cap. It was a flat cap, like a radiator cap that was on it. And what I did, I added that because it has the venting through the cap with some kind of mesh that gives it a little bit more filtering than what these three slots. You had a slot here, and a slot here, and that's what pulled the air in to go down for venting of the engine. And I figured, you know, any amount of filtering might be better. Okay, so we just take him off. All right, there's your rocker boxes. Rocker arms. Okay. Now what's funny here is that I don't have a flywheel or a bell housing on this engine, so I cannot show you exactly how to time it. So that might be a slight little problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the engine to where it's at the #1 plug, and we'll see what it does as far as getting it on either on compression or exhaust stroke. Let me see, am I close to number one? See, number one's right here. A little bit more. Right. That looks like number one. I'm looking at where the rotor buttons, I want it placed directly underneath where the number one plug fires. So that's pretty close. These should be loose. He's loose, and he's loose. All right. Now number 6, one of them should be tight, and it is. The other one, okay, good. So we're on number one. We're on compression stroke on number one. See, that's loose and that's loose. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we would determine the valve setting and then adjust it if we need to. All right, the intakes are set at 8 thousandths. Now this engine, of course, is cold, and it does indicate to do it on a warm engine. Now I got to tell you, and somebody's not going to like, they may give me a little discussion on this, but I have set valves with the engine cold at 8,000 and intake, 13 on exhaust, and run the engine all day long, running around, and then do a check of the valve clearance after the fact, and it'd be almost the exact same thing. In other words, you're supposed to allow for heat expansion, parts expansion, and that occurs with the as the engines warm up. But anyway, that's what I've discovered. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it with the engine warm. I'm just saying, when I set valves cold and went back and checked them hot, there wasn't that enough difference to warrant having to readjust them. So anyway, now you can look at your intake manifold and determine what's an intake valve and what's an exhaust valve. You can tell here's an exhaust port at the very end, so this is the exhaust valve and this is the intake valve. All right, so what we're going to do, we know we're at a compression stroke, that both cam lobes are at the very lowest position. So I'm going to check this exhaust valve, and it should be 13 thousandths. And let's see what we get here. And look at it's, I'm feeling a little bit of drag. Okay, let me make sure that's picking that up. Okay. Let's see if we can get a little closer here. Maybe let me see if I can zoom in. Maybe that'll help some. All right. All right, here we go. All right, now let's get back here. Now this is at 13 thousandths, and I'm getting drag. All right, there's a little bit of side play, so I could actually stand to adjust that, and I'll do that just for GP. Now this is the next one is intake, and that's 8 thousandths. And let's see, 8 thousandths will not go in. Look at that. Well, it did go. All right. Actually, that's perfect. The intake, it took a while. So you're not going to force open a valve with with this feeler gauge. So that's perfect. I can feel drag on both sides of it, and it does go in and out. So that's exactly right. So I want 8 thousandths on that intake. All right, so on the exhaust, let's see, I believe that's 5/8 and a straight slot screwdriver. All right, let's see. Might be a 9/16. I used to be able to determine real easily. And it's 5/8. All right. And what I want a standard instead of ratcheting. Let's get a standard 5/8. Okay. All right. Always make note of where you're sitting at on your before you make an adjustment. It looks like I'm at about 1 o'clock. I'm looking at the slot here, and it's a straight slot. It's about 1 o'clock. All right. So what I want to do is break it loose. All right. He's broke loose. And you can see it turned. Might have to break him loose more to get it turned. Okay, I'm back at 1 o'clock. All right. Now, you know, there's some videos online showing how when they on the assembly lines they set these. They got a special tool and they set these valves with the engines turning. Isn't that something? Yeah. Yeah. I've never done it that way. Well, boy, it's I'd like to have that tool. All right, so here we go. We got 13ths going in. You know, one good way to do it would be to tighten it to where you can't move it, then just barely open it. Okay, there you go. Barely goes in. I'm getting resistance on both sides. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that in there. I'm taking note. Now I'm almost at 2 o'clock. All right. So while you hold that steady, you tighten this up. Now it's not unheard of. You may have to turn it the opposite way. And let's see. Still good. All right. So now I'm going to cinch it down. There we go. And as my man Curly would say, it's perfect. It's perfect. All right. That's exactly where I want it. Look at that. That's it. So that's how easy it is. Now, I'm going to put a link up of a. I'll take a picture of it, and and that picture should pop up about right now. And what it does is, you only have to do 2 rotations of the crank in order to adjust all your valves, okay? And it's kind of a trick someone put together, probably an old timer from way back in the day. And you don't have to, you know, spin it to the next firing order, do these 2, then the next. And I mean, you can do that if you want to, but this procedure or method is a lot easier. So to where you only have to spin it 180 degrees, all right, to get number 6 on compression, and then you can do the others, all right. So it's real slick. Anyway, that's basically how you do adjust the valves on this engine, on the stove bolt engine. The 261, the 235, the 235 splasher, and the 216, they all adjust the same. They have the common rail here. And just to explain the oiling a little bit, we'll back up a little. All right, come back over here. Probably show better on this other side. All right. All right. In the previous general description, part 1 of this preventative maintenance video, I showed where the oil distributor attaches to a fitting that runs through the block, and it comes out in this oil gap. See, this is the lifter gallery behind this pan here, and it comes out of the block, and it's sealed. And it has a copper line that runs over, and then it turns and runs up, and it connects right here. Okay? Now that's how your oil gets up here to the top end. Let's get him out of the way for a moment. He'll sit. All right. So the oil comes up under pressure. It gets it, and it runs down this tube, the rocker shaft. Each end is sealed. Okay? And once the shaft is filled, the oil will seep out on the bottom of the shaft, around races in the rocker arms, and out these little holes right here, these little weep holes. Sometimes it could take minutes before you'll see oil seeping out of these weep holes. But once it starts seeping, it's going to seep until the engine stops, okay? And that oil, once it seeps out of here, that means it's already lubricated the whole rocker arm around the rocker shafts, okay? And then it's splashed around. It gets around on the tips here. It gets in the socket here for the adjustments. So splashing oil lubricates from the rocker arms going back and forth the rest of the rocker arms up here, the valve train. Now there is, even though this is a low pressure engine, there is some oil pressure that's up here and with the splashing. And I've had, since day one of this, a problem keeping this valve cover from leaking. I've heard people with 216s claim that they can get theirs not to leak. I tell you what, that is a great thing if they could. I could never get mine not to leak. And mainly, it would leak back here in this back end and leak down and get leak down that way, making you think you had a main seal, you had a rear main seal leak, when it was actually the oil running down the back side. But anyway, I never had I tried cork, silicone, RTV. I tried everything in the world, and I just was not successful in stopping. I did slow it to an acceptable level, but man, oh man, it was something. Now, you know, I touched out also about the water valve to turn your hot water onto your heater, and here it is right here. Here's the heater valve right here. It'll turn out, and what it is, it's just a simple on and off valve. It's ran all the way in, and it shuts the water off. You run it out, it allows water to go out to the heater core, and it comes back right here. Boy, that's how it was great. Now, heaters were not, on these trucks, was an option. It was a dealer added option. I don't know if you could order one from the factory installed. I'm gonna guess you probably could, but this particular truck, again, I knew the owner. I knew him well, and I've got some of his paperwork. And when he bought the truck, he went for the optional bypass oil filter, he went for the optional horn, and he went to the optional 650 16 wheels, tires, to get, you know, bigger tires. He did not go for the heater. Now, into that first winter they had of this truck, I understand that they went out back to the dealer and purchased the Arvin heater that is still working to this day in the GMC. I'm talking about the exact same 6-volt motor, the exact same heater core is still working and not leaking. Isn't that an amazing thing? Now, granted, the truck sat from 69 to 2004, 2005, but it sat there with antifreeze in it. You know, I mean, corrosion could have set in or something. The engine, the electric motor could have just rusted up and locked up. But no, this stuff still works. It's amazing. Anyway, that's pretty much your 216 right there. All right, we got the timing, the tune-up done. I really like this timing light. Time will tell how durable it is, whether or not I'll endorse it or not. I do like it though. I like the idea of the tack and the timing and being able to easily adjust it via these buttons here. It's really nice. If it had a dwell meter, it'd have everything. So there you go. I took the bypass oil filter off the Chevy, the 216, and I'm going to go ahead and clean him up and get him painted, because I believe I am going to go ahead and bolt him onto the Chevy. I've got the draft tube out here draining. That's for the PCV modification, because he's got condensation in him. You know, that engine really picked it up. So anyway, that should put a fork in the tune-up episode here. If you got any questions, comments, let me know. If you like it, if you like this kind of stuff, give me a like. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Clicking the like and clicking the subscribe won't cost you anything, and it'll help me out with YouTube. So anyway, thanks for watching. You have a good one, and we'll see you around.